Welcome to the Coastside Fire Protection District Board of Directors Regular Board Meeting, October 28, 2020. Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane.
Present.
Director Stockman.
Present.
Director McKimmey.
Remotely present.
Aren't we all? Vice President Cockrell
Here.
and President Burke.
Here.
Attorney Savory.
Here.
Deputy Chief Cox.
Here.
And Chief Larkin.
Here.
And myself.
Please
Hi,
join
everybody.
me with saying a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the consent calendar, Jean, Bruce will be recusing himself. But with that, do I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
I make a motion to approve it.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane.
Yes.
Director Stockman.
Yes.
Director McKimmey is recused. Vice President Cockrell
Yes.
and President Burke.
Yes.
Passes 401 by roll call.
Continuing on, continuing business, item 6A, review and discuss draft training center administration manual. Chief Cox.
Yeah, thank you, President. This is in response to Director McKimmey's request at the last meeting regarding the training center and the use for it for outside organizations. In front of you is the updated administration manual, kind of adopted from the original version, that really outlines who, when, and how organizations can utilize the facility. And really what the intent is to find a balance between making it accessible and usable for a price for organizations that may want to use it on the coast, or to have some sort of benefit for our firefighters if there is training going on, and serving a benefit therefore to the district. You'll notice in there with it, we worked on just some languaging around the process for requesting to use the facility. And that includes the ability for certain organizations to go to the board eventually if they are requesting it. But also if there is a benefit to the district, making it accessible, as long as organizations were willing to sign the release of liability and agree to all of the terms of the training center. So this is really just being brought forward as a balanced document to clarify how the center is to be used by what organizations, and would love any input on it as a result.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah. Any questions or comments regarding the manual? Chief, I have just one, and this probably is overkill, but is there any need to have in here something that says that the district reserves the right to refuse a meeting to any group at any time, or language similar to that? Or is that kind of included when you don't fill out or you don't approve the application?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jean, what would your recommendation be there?
I don't think you need that, Gary, because the chief will be looking at the type of training, determining whether it's appropriate, whether it'll be staffed correctly. So implicit in all of that is if they don't meet the requirements that are laid out in the training manual, the answer would be no to those individuals.
That's fine. That's fine. If there's no other questions, do I have a motion to approve the training center administration manual?
I make a motion to approve the said manual.
I'll second the motion.
Any further questions? Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane.
Yes.
Director Stockman.
Yes.
Director McKimmey.
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell
Yes.
and President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to continuing business, item B, review and discuss the movement of Battalion Chief 10 to Fire Station 41. Chief Cox.
Yeah, thank you, President Burke. This really is a operational move that I think requires buy-in and agreement from the board because it has implications for responses across the district. As you're aware, on the district, we staff 3 fire engines and 1 battalion chief 24 hours a day. That battalion chief is the on-duty supervisor for all large incidents on the coast. And that includes, structure fires, vehicle accidents, large rescues. Currently, that battalion chief, Battalion 10, whenever they're on duty, is based out of Station 40. The new Fire Station 41 was designed for the battalion chief to be residing at that location. And really the reason for that is the location being centralized within the district. So the responses to calls is more spread out. At the moment, they're just a little bit further from the north end, the Devil's Slide Tunnel area, Montara Moss Beach. And they do go fairly far south based on the call types in the South County. So our recommendation is to relocate Battalion 10 to Station 41 to kind of centralize them in the center of the district. It is a move that we can always reverse if we start to see a trend of the battalion chief's times lagging into Half Moon Bay or onto 92. But I think with the opening of Station 41, it would be prudent to put our supervisor in the middle of the district.
Thank you, Chief. Questions and comments?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, question, Chief Cox, is there, it seems like completely logical from an operational response standpoint. Is any of your line personnel voiced a concern of making that change? Is there any, have you had any feedback that wouldn't be the best location?
No, I personally haven't had any feedback that someone doesn't believe that to be the case. I think, everyone understands the logic behind it. And, I've spoken with the battalion chiefs as well to kind of get their informal input that, how's it going to affect call responses? Since we are a system in the county, it may pull Battalion 2 from Woodside up the hill a little bit further. It may pull Battalion 10 up north through the tunnel a little bit more. And that's something we're going to have to evaluate, 6 months down the line. What does it look like when we move a battalion chief up one district? Does it still make sense? We believe it does, but we could be wrong if those kind of pieces of data come back.
Yeah, totally understandable. I'll say from a person that lives in El Granada, that it makes complete sense because it's much easier, especially from where the station's located. Once you get on the highway, it's much easier to travel south than it is north in most cases. So I think that's just that reason alone. So thank you.
Yep.
Further questions or comments? Chief, it seems like it's a logical thing. First of all, it's an operational issue, and you're certainly in the position to make that kind of judgment. I'm not sure that we have the background the board have the background to do that. However, since it's on the board, why don't we just have a motion to approve it, if you would, please, Steve.
Yes, I make a motion to relocate the on-duty battalion chief to Station 41.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmey,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes.
and President Burke.
Yes.
Passes 5-0
Moving on
by
to
roll.
new business, item A, presentation on vegetation management in the Coastside Fire Protection District. Chief Cox.
Thank you, President Burke. This is really in light of the reformation of the Vegetation Management Committee on the board and giving the board a snapshot of vegetation management in the district, the nuances of it, the complications of it, and all the details. So I'm going to try to share my screen here real quick. And you also have this presentation in front of you. Everyone can see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I'll just start off kind of with where we're at. And I think the conversation that we've been having a lot around wildfires is what's going on and what are we experiencing right now in California. And really from our perspective, there's two big things that are happening. There's a climatic change that's occurring both with the temperatures, the highest temperatures on record for the last 5 years, the length of fire season, and the changing of vegetation across the state. One of the most interesting things that we've experienced in California over the last 5 years is the increased nighttime temperatures that really reduces the ability for vegetation to regain the moisture they need to carry them through the next day. So that's why we're seeing these larger fires burning larger areas because of how dry the fuel is and how impacted we are by these hotter temperatures. But the climactic part of the problem is only half the issue. The other half is we've put out fires for the last 100 years, and we've put them out small, and we have a buildup of land across California that has a lot of dead, dying, and overgrown acres. Before the European settlements in North America, this land was burning or was being burnt every 30 to 50 years on average on the return interval of fire. So for 100 years of fire suppression, we've really impacted that natural cycle. And as a result, we have this increased vegetation. We also have a population that now lives in these areas, and we have aging infrastructure. And so those are the two big factors right now, the climate and the human factors, that are leading to more fires, more destruction, and kind of more frequency of the fires that we are seeing across the state. That's kind of where we're at in a snapshot in California. The data as far as the weather's concerned, we've had the 5 hottest years on record and one of the longest sustained droughts in California. We also have over 129 dead or dying trees across the state, 129 million. And that is basically because of a bug infestation, a bark beetle that thrives on drought conditions. That if you've been into the Sierras, you've probably seen a big result of. And looking for the last 20 years versus the 20 years previous, you can see the average number of acres burned annually is almost double month over month. If you look for 20 years, the past 20 years versus 84 to 2000. And what that really tells us is over the next 20 years, the trajectory is we're going to see even longer fire seasons. We're going to see even more acres burned, and we're going to see even more destruction across the state. So what we've learned from our perspective as the fire agency is that on these large fires, a lot of times firefighting is not effective in the initial attack phase. If you think of the large wind-driven fires of the Camp Fire or the Woolsey Fire, the Tubbs Fire, those weren't firefights. Those were really Mother Nature firmly in control. And it's required more coordination, more deployments, and they've really been mass casualty incidents. With that, we've had longer burning and more deployments. We've had to look at ways of traffic congestion. And at the end of the day, the most vulnerable populations are really the ones that are most at risk across California, including the Coastside, because they're the ones who are disproportionately impacted by these large events. So that's kind of the intro to kind of how do we get to vegetation management in the district and who's responsible. The best way to think about vegetation management across the Coastside is that the property owner is responsible for ensuring compliance with all laws, statutes, and ordinances related to veg management and wildfire prevention and preparedness. And that's a really important part of the puzzle because it all comes down to land ownership. We don't live in the Sierras where a lot of the area is owned by the federal government on forested lands. We live in areas where people own property, whether it be local citizens, organizations, districts, and it's really their responsibility to maintain their lands. So on the coast, how do we understand our land categories? This is going to be a little bit confusing, but I'll try to walk everyone through it. On the left, in the light blue with the green is essentially the district, what LAFCO considers the Coastside Fire Protection District. Within our district, we have two types of land. We have local responsibility area and state responsibility area, LRA and SRA. And the reason that's important is LRA has one set of requirements when it comes to vegetation management, and the SRA has another set in that zones. So you combine that and you get that real multicolored map of our district that shows the SRA, the LRA, and then within the LRA, the very high fire hazard severity zones of the LRA, which are a completely different category of requirements. So in our district, we have a real patchwork of different land ownership, or sorry, land classifications, being LRA or SRA, that really impact what we do either on vegetation management or what we require in the fire marshal's office for building. So with that, there's really these four classifications. Our lands in the district are either improved or unimproved. And an unimproved parcel would be just an empty parcel with nothing on it. An improved parcel would be somebody's property where they have a home or something built on it. We have the government structure of that area, either incorporated in the city of Half Moon Bay or unincorporated up in El Granada, Moss Beach, and Montera. And then we have that responsibility area that I just talked about, either SRA or LRA. And then we have a fire hazard classification, whether it's a very high fire in the LRA or it's SRA. And these are the four components that we use when we look at vegetation management, building codes, and how our fire marshals make requirements for where and how people maintain their property. So maybe the largest and most comprehensive document we have in the district is the fire code, and that was adopted in 2019, Ordinance 2019-03, which is the California Fire Code that spells out for all buildings, all projects in the district, the lot shall be cleared of brush, vegetation, and growth of combustible materials upon written notification by the Coastside Fire Protection District. So this is probably the single biggest legal document that we use for enforcement of the fire code, is the ordinance of the fire code that was adopted in 2019 by the district. And it establishes the weed abatement requirements for the unimproved parcels. It also acknowledges the state's 4291 requirements. And the good thing about it is it applies district-wide. This is the one requirement that isn't based on land or ownership. It's really universal across the district and what we rely on the most. Within the fire code, section 304 relates to combustible waste material. And it really spells out in there what the property owner must do to maintain vegetation and waste material on their property. And again, it applies to the coast. So kind of first takeaway from this whole presentation is our fire code adoption is the single most important document we have related to vegetation management enforcement on the code side. The second most useful piece of code is 4291. And this is the requirement of defensible space around structures. That's 30 feet immediately around the structure, and then an additional 70 feet for a total of 100 feet requirement. This applies to all SRA lands in the district. So all of the land within the fire district that has that state responsibility area designation. And it also applies to all of the LRA, or within the city, that is designated as a very high fire hazard severity zone. So when we go and do defensible space inspections, this is really the authority that we have to go and enforce the 100-foot vegetation clearance within the district, both on SRA lands and LRA, very high fire hazard severity lands. And it spells out, it also has a sister public resource code, which is PRC 4290. And 4290 is what we use for all new construction in the SRA within the district, the state responsibility district. And that really regulates the road access, the standard signage, the water supply, and the fire breaks. Now, I will say our fire code ordinance meets or exceeds the 4290 requirements. So we have a fairly robust requirement for regulations when it comes to new construction within the district. When it comes to actual materials that people are allowed to build within the district, Chapter 7A of the building code is what we use that really defines the materials that people can build with in the SRA and the very high LRA throughout the district. And it's been in place since 2009, and it's really the document that allows us to approve building in very high fire zones because of the fact that the materials they're using are what are considered non-combustible. Finally, we also have our annual weed abatement program. And this is a program that you adopt annually by the board as basically calling out individual parcels as weed being a nuisance. They are then required to destroy the weeds, and it's all organized through our fire marshal's office here in the district. If they fail to, we will remove the weeds for them and put it on their tax roll. And that authority is really for the unimproved parcels. We don't focus on improved parcels because that falls under the fire code under 4291. This is to keep the weeds down or the vegetation down on those lots where there's no people living or building. So what do? We basically do defensible space inspections throughout the district. And the SRA, we use the CAL FIRE LE 100 form. In the LRA, we use the district inspection form. This requires people to clear 100 feet around their structure, and it applies to all of the SRA and all of the very high LRA. And if they fail, there will be a follow-up inspection 30 days after, and then an additional 30 days after that. What we always like to say is defensible space inspections are not a substitute for not doing the work. So just because we didn't do the inspection does not alleviate the property owner of doing the work themselves. We try to get to as many properties as possible, but on a season like this or a year like this, obviously we're limited by the fact that we're out fighting a lot of fires as well. So to kind of summarize all this and important takeaways, large vegetation management projects are coordinated by CAL FIRE, San Mateo County Fire Safe, San Mateo RCD, and it's a really collaborative effort, vegetation management throughout this county. It is the responsibility of the landowner. We do know one of the biggest concerns right now on the coast is the eucalyptus concern, and that's really on all those lands that are adjacent to and above El Granada Boulevard in the Quarry Park area, and then kind of almost coming all the way down to Highway 1. With that, we do know that there will be neighborhood chipping scheduled to take place in El Granada later this fall, as well as in Moss Beach. And that should be expanding over the coming years because it is such a popular program. New development on the coast is subject to all of these requirements. So all of the wildland urban interface building requirements. And existing property is subject to either weed abatement or defensible space at the moment. One thing I will say is the county, as Director McShane probably is aware, is working on a kind of a study group as to how to confront the eucalyptus issue on the coast. So I think there's some real momentum there with the San Mateo County Resource Conservation District, RCD, on more of a programmatic permitting process should somebody want to take out a tree on their property, making that as easy as possible instead of getting them kind of caught up in details. So to summarize all of this, in your packet on the front page is really just our cheat sheet to vegetation management, defensible space, and wildland interface building codes in the district. And on the left side, it really lines out all the different land types that we have in the district. And then as you go across, there's all of the different enforcement, public resource codes, and statutes that we're required to enforce. And it really says in there whether it's applicable or not to that type of the property. I will say it is not a simple a chart to understand because it all is based on land type, as far as whether it's LRA or SRA, and then the rating of the fire hazard severity zone. But this is probably the cleanest and most logical way to explain it. As we're on the subject, just some additional wildfire preparedness things to note in the county. We have been successful in working with Alert Wildfire out of the University of Nevada, Reno on the installation of several Alert Wildfire cameras. Those are currently on the 3 community service or community college district sites of Cabrillo College, College of San Mateo, and Skyline. And there are additional cameras planned to be installed up on North Peak, and we have installed one up on Allen up above Half Moon Bay. This will expand. We're looking for other sites on the coast where we can get some cameras. This really gives us the ability to look at the fire before we get there and augment our dispatches. So get more resources en route as we're on our way to the fire. And they are a very valuable resource to have eyes on a fire early. The last thing that we're working on at the moment, and I've spoken several times about, is our Zone Haven evacuation management platform. One thing that we've been working on countywide is standardizing evacuation management. We've been working with this company. We're the first county in California to use a technology platform to try to solve this problem. This platform has grown. It was used during the CZU fire and has grown to over 10 counties now. And really what we want to do is we're giving first responders the ability to look at data, how many people live in an area, how fast it takes to evacuate that area, being able to evacuate a zone using a single click, and then working with our law enforcement partners to look at real-time traffic to really see where we need to control intersections or if we need to redirect people because we're starting to get a lot of congestion. So this is in the final stages of development. We plan a public rollout of this in mid-November. So you should be hearing a lot about a Know Your Zone campaign in San Mateo County to get people aware of the evacuation zone that they live in. That's all I have. I know it's a lot to digest. I'm happy to answer any questions or to give any clarification.
Chief, thank you. That was a great overview, and you're correct. It's a lot to digest at one time. But anyway, questions, comments, please.
I have
I
any
don't believe it.
questions, I'll just ask Jenny, because she understands all this stuff. She's on the committee, so she can explain it to me. So that's we're very fortunate.
What I'm planning on doing, JB, is when I get to my agenda item, which is 8D, I plan on doing a summary.
Oh,
But-
good.
Thank you, Ginny. We'll look forward to that. Let me make just a couple of observations and regarding this thing. One of the challenges, I think, for a citizen, and not for the professionals, because certainly Chief Cox and his peers understand who's on first and who's doing what, but to a citizen, or even I think to some case the board members, the multitude of agencies and organizations that are involved in both the preventive side of it, as well as the wildfire side of it, gets to be very confusing. And maybe there's no answer to this thing, but you know, CAL FIRE's role from a state point of view, if there, God forbid, is a wildfire on the coast, their role is pretty clear to me. But the role of, and I'll come back to this in a moment, but what our local role is a little bit fuzzy to me. But I've noticed that the cities, or a city in our district, has used the term that they're looking at wildfire plans, and what their role is not clear to me at all. I know the Fire Safe Council is involved in this. You mentioned the county organizations that's involved in it. I don't know whether the county EOC is involved or whether the Coastside group or so forth is involved. So I think the multitude of these organizations simply adds to the, and I don't want to use the word confusing because I guess it's applying it to myself, but it applies to professional. But I think that's one of the issues that we have to deal with, and precisely how we make this understandable and available to the public and to citizens, I think, is a challenge. Other comments?
No kidding.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I have a question for you, Chief Cox, is that as it relates to SRA, how would it be different? And I think it's an opportunity to show the benefit of CAL FIRE providing service to the district. How would the SRA be treated differently if it was, as in the past, that the district that CAL FIRE did not provide the service? Does that affect it? Does that question make sense? That you have such a large state responsibility area surrounding and part of the district, but how does that rule change when CAL FIRE is the fire district?
Yeah,
provider?
that's a great question, Steve. And I think the best way to think about it is on new development in the SRA, the way that the 4290 regulation is written, it really says that the director actually is responsible, or his designee, for approving new construction in that area, basically CAL FIRE to approve new construction. So by having the fire district be CAL FIRE, you have two hats being worn at the same time in the fire marshal's office, because they're looking at it from the local jurisdictional side under the ordinance 2019-03 on the fire code, and they're also looking at it with their state public resource code 4290 hat on at the same time as well. So you don't have that redundancy going on. I think the really important part to kind of all of this is CAL FIRE's state mission is to protect the private lands, the SRA, from wildland fire. The district's mission is to protect the structures and the people within the district. So when you put it together, if we were to have a large incident on the coast, we would be in unified command between CAL FIRE and the district being focused on the structures, CAL FIRE being focused on the wildlands. And that is another kind of a response benefit in the sense that we're one. We're not two agencies trying to redundantly do the same thing. We're one agency with two hats on. So there is, both on the response side and the prevention side, some overlap that the redundancy gets cut out.
Yeah, great explanation. Thank you.
Gary, do you want
Yes.
me to take my portion now instead of waiting until?
Well, let's wait to see if we have any more other questions, because I
Okay.
have a couple that, Ginny, and then we'll see how
Sure.
this goes in a moment. Have we find, Chief, if we
I have
find
one
anybody?
additional quick,
Go ahead, Steve.
just on the same point, and then I'll let it, there was some local media stories of the county supervisors making an approval of, I guess it's funding.
Yes.
Can you add to that at all of what, boy, I'm having a hard time forming complete questions today, but does this report relate to support from the county supervisors through management and funding to make the county safer? Was
Yes,
that what that media story was in this last week's review?
Yeah,
Ginny, I think do you have the answer, Chief, or Ginny looks like she's ready to
okay,
jump in.
what I did was I went to the 3-hour meeting, and it was great. It was attended by the Board of Supervisors and Kelly X. Nelson, who is the San Mateo Resource Conservation District Director. Also, Richard Sampson, who's our wonderful help here, who's a former forester. We had Chris Hunter, President Slocum Horn was there. I'm missing someone here. Anyhow, there were so many there that it was a 3-hour meeting. And I have something over there I have to get in a minute. But let me summarize what I have in front of me. Basically, it is hard, Mr. Burke, because there's so many excellent, wonderful people interested in this subject. And yes, there is money that will be provided. And Carol Groom from the supervisor's office, who's on the Board of Supervisors, is going to dig into that particular area to try to fund some of this. And also the people who spoke, which made it such an interesting subject for me, is there were people talking about the parks in the county of San Mateo. There were people there, again, this wonderful Kelly person who was talking about her work. There were people talking, Richard Sampson talking about climate change and maintaining defensible space for your homes and roads. And one thing that everybody seemed to have brought up is the eucalyptus trees. That's a really big concern because they're almost like matchsticks standing up. They're very dangerous, and they're not from this area. They were brought here, I think, from Australia. This San Mateo Fire Safe Council was talking about them being highly flammable, and you know, once we get some money ahead, maybe we can use it there. There's a real push to cut those trees down. It's expensive to get rid of eucalyptus trees, but I don't think we're going to have much trouble governing that situation because so many people are on the same page. And those people who live there are very worried about those trees. And once cleared, it solves itself. And there's not much wildlife in there in those areas. So it's not as if it's a habitat. And another thing is they're watching the coastal chaparral, the Douglas fir, the pine trees, which have a 40-year lifespan, and the private roads, which need to be maintained. Measure K money may be used for the fuel reduction. Another thing that's really interesting is the chipping program, because what we do is the Fire Safe Council, I guess since 1987, has been doing the chipping program, which is very needed, and it's on the schedule to do.
Jenny, can I interrupt? Were there some action that came out of the meeting that people were supposed to do or change, or was this just an exchange of ideas?
It was an exchange of ideas, and definitely the two people who are going to be heading the Board of Supervisors on this are Don Horsley and the gentleman that is from San Mateo, and I'm trying to think of his name at the moment. I can't
I think it's David Canepa.
Right, thank you, Chief. And what
Are there other meetings of this group scheduled, Jenny?
what they're doing is I'm going to kind of like follow them and find out what they're doing. I'm trying to figure out what my role is because it was so easy when I did this about 12 years ago, because I just walked around with Rich Sampson and Chief Ferreira. But now, I mean, with our current fires that we had on the Coastside, we had so many concerns. I want to get one more thing before I stop.
Hello.
The county is going, I don't know if you can see this, but it was in today's paper. The county is going to dedicate staff and funds for fire prevention. They plan to do work. But as far as answering your question, Gary, at the moment, it's like a whole herd of people that are so interested in this. So I would say that the person that is really taking the lead on this is Don Horsley.
Well, Jenny, would you, on behalf of the board, simply continue to follow it and report to us what actions or what communications are taking place, and then we'll be able to better understand it as well.
Okay,
Your involvement will be helpful.
There is one more thing that is a major concern is the insurance. The property insurance, the insurance companies are writing to people, their customers, and they're saying, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is what we want to see if you want to continue doing business with this fire company. They're very, very, very concerned about all of the things that are on these packages that we pass out.
Okay, thank you. Chief, I got just a couple of quick comments, I guess, on the subject. And but the open question is to you, and I don't expect an answer off the top of your head here, but if there is things that the Coastside Fire District can do in this whole area of wildfire and vegetation management, I'd like to have you suggest it and we could take action. For example, if we need to start writing letters or influencing public officials regarding cutting down eucalyptus trees, that would be something that, politically it might add some weight to some actions that need to be done. I don't know whether anybody who hasn't adhered to the defensible space has ever been fined. And if they haven't, then we ought to start doing it to do that. I don't know whether all the items that and the details on the vegetation management and the defensible space is clearly outlined in on our website, but if it isn't, perhaps that's another thing to do. But Chief, without going through a laundry list, I'd like to just ask for you to lead us and give us some suggestions. I think we're wide open to do whatever it is that needs to be done, and perhaps reaching out. I don't know whether the San Francisco watershed allows break roads through there, but it would seem to me that having some way of getting through that a mass of trees and forests would be one thing that would be helpful. I'll stop, but I'd simply ask you to provide anything that you think would be helpful to us. Anything else? Any other questions?
Well, I would say, Mr. President, that the insurance companies have really gotten I've talked today to several homeowners who have gotten letters from their insurance companies telling them what they need to do about taking the limbs at a certain height on their trees, and even to the point where they don't like hedges that are leaning up against a house if it's a flammable hedge. I mean, they have done their homework on this because
I know
about all the money that they have to spend to
I know it's a problem, but I don't know
house.
I know it's a problem, but I'm not sure we're going to be getting into the advocating for insurance business. Anything else on this,
No.
on the Chief's report? Thank you again, Chief.
Thank
It
you.
was very helpful. Moving on. Item B, review and discuss annual CalPERS report for 2019. And I know we have two individuals that are going to have to recuse themselves. So I'm going to make this relatively quick, but I think it's an area that deserves some attention. Just as by background, the board may remember that in July, we received and approved the analysis of the retiree trust fund, and in balance found that to be in good shape. Unfortunately, CalPERS funding for farmer employees' retirement is another story. This just quick review is not to take any action. It's just to kind of educate us and get us up to date as to what's going on for possible consideration sometime down the road. Overall, including the Coastside Fire District, CalPERS is 70% funded. This is based on the assumption that CalPERS will earn 7% each year to overcome their deficit of some $160 billion. Pretty tough road to hoe on that. The last year, which is not in the material that's in our packet, the CalPERS earned 4.7%, and over a 20-year period, they've averaged 5.5% during that same time, when their goal most of that time, of course, was 7.5%. So the choices that CalPERS is facing are pretty straightforward. They've either got to earn higher returns or they're going to require more payment from employers, one of whom is us. Not in your packet is a section 2 that was referred to in the handout, and you have to go online to look at it. And I encourage my board members to do so, but it takes a look at the entire safety risk pool information of all the organizations that are in the safety risk pool, which includes the Coastside Fire Protection District. That it includes, it's for farmer employees, has nothing to do with CAL FIRE. But the projected benefits in just the safety pool is some $28 billion. And the funded ratio of that safety pool is only 71%. And the risk pool access are only 16%. The difference between 16 billion versus a bill or a benefits of 28 billion. The discount rate, which was 7.5, has been reduced to 7% over the next few years. And when they reduce that, that increases the amount of payments that somebody's got to make. They've either got to earn more money or we've got to come up for more. And there are 1,252 individual plans that are in the safety pool in total. Let me now just go to the portion that's in our packet very quickly of where we stand within that safety pool. We're an inactive, no employees. We're in the risk pool. We have 57 retirees in that area. The total number of retirees and active people are 42,000, but we have 57. The present value of future benefits for our retirees is some $41 million. The market value that we have accrued towards that goal is some $28 million. In other words, it's some $12+ million, which is unfunded for just our portion of the risk pool. Very interesting, if you look at page 14 in your handout, you'll notice that in 2011, our total liability was $31 million, and we had assets of $25 million. So we were underfunded by $66 million, and we were 81% funded in total. If you jump forward to 2019, our total liability has jumped now for the same people. Now, we've not added anybody, these are the same people. Our total liability has jumped to $41 million. Our assets have gone from $25 to $28 million. Our unfunded liability has gone from $6 to $12 million. And our ratio of funding has dropped from 81 to 69%. So how you look at it, it's not particularly good news. In CalPERS payment this year is, or rather actually last year, was $1,215,000. Next year it's going to jump to $1,361,000, an increase of $146,000. A hypothetical termination, and some of you may remember that we inquired about the ability to terminate and bond rather than paying annually on this. And in the handout, you'll notice that there is a hypothetical termination based on market rates and risk-free securities. And depending on what the value of those are, to terminate our responsibilities, which we're certainly not going to, I don't mean to say that we're going to stop payment to the retirees. That certainly is not the point. But the cost of doing that, it would be $40 million to $85 million. Clearly just something that we just have no opportunity to consider. So finally, the choices that, if you look at this and the value of going through this, is to educate us for a little bit. But if you notice in the handout, some of the choices we have is, one is that CalPERS is now saying that we can make discretionary contributions. We can make simply added money and provide it to them to reduce our liability. They also have a new amortization schedule that we could set up a planned schedule of increased payments. That's on page 13. Another third opportunity is, if you remember at one point we've talked about, PAS has an investment program that is dedicated to reducing the CalPERS liability. And fourth, you could investigate the termination and bonding as we did once some 10+ years ago. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to give you my conclusion on this. And that is, my personal recommendation is right at this point that we do nothing. I think our concentration has to be on the new location and for Station 44, which is part of our strategic plan. And the second recommendation is that each year, we get an update on this each year, and I would urge Chief Cox to make sure that this the next year's update is put on the agenda so that we can continue to inform ourselves as how we're going. Because I don't care how, at least as I look at this, at some point in time, it's going to be a very difficult situation for this board and this taxpayers at the Coastside to handle. Any questions?
Yes, let me ask you this. In terms of the future, how do you see us doing this, Mr. Burke?
Right now, my personal view is, and I certainly am no expert on all this, but we do not have the financial wherewithal, I don't believe, to consider bonding rather than paying directly to CAL FIRE because of our priority, I think, with Station 44. Long range, and I would say that by long range, I mean that certainly when and I think most people on this board are long gone, somebody's going to look at this and say, wow, what the heck happened? Because I see, CalPERS has not demonstrated the ability to meet the objectives that they set. And frankly, from a political point of view, the chances of anything changing in the way the program is administered, I think, are very remote. Long-winded answer. Look, I don't want to belabor this point. I just wanted to give us an update. When there's no action required, I would ask that, again, Chief Cox, make sure that this gets on the agenda each year so the boards can be informed. End of comments.
I'm glad you brought this up. Thank you.
Now I've lost my agenda. Okay, here we go. Moving on, review and discuss approved documents recommended for destructions according with district retention policy. Chief Cox.
Thank you, Director Burke. As you may remember from last month, we discussed that staff has been focusing on sorting through the storage unit that we have in Princeton, and quite a few records that were either damaged or destroyed because of water that infiltrated there a few years back. What staff has done is they've gone through and gone box by box and referenced the materials that are in there against the retention policy. We had more than one person do it, so that there's two sets of recommendations of the records that don't currently meet the document retention policy. And what we're seeking to do is to get approval from the board to have a destruction service come out to destroy these documents. And then we will be exploring a formal records management service moving forward that will have the formal management of our documents in a more secure location that's a little bit more easy for us to reference and gain access to.
Do I have a motion for the instructions of documents in accordance with document retention schedule? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll make a second. Any further comments or questions to the chief regarding what we're doing here? Boy, this must be a big truck to get rid of all this stuff.
The apparatus bay is full.
Jeez. Any questions or comments?
Are there any souvenirs in there? Like old badges and cute?
No, these are all documents.
Okay,
This is
Okay,
Chief
we have
Cox, this is just standard housekeeping. You have no concerns about the liability to the district and destroying any of those documents?
No, I don't, especially because they've been cross-referenced twice as to what they are. I was the same as you, very concerned that we don't want to get rid of anything that we're legally required to hold on to.
Okay, thank you.
Are these documents the ones that are in the warehouse someplace?
Yeah, they are. They're the ones
Okay.
that were in the warehouse in Princeton
Yeah.
that have been rotting
Okay.
is probably the best way to put it.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane,
yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes,
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell, and President Burke.
Yes.
That's
Moving on,
fine.
item D, review and discuss and approve the surplus of equipment. Chief Cox.
Thank you, Director Burke. This is also an ongoing project, the next step in it. If you've come by Station 40, you've probably noticed the new arrangements, the new furniture, the new ergonomics, the new workflows for the Fire Marshal's office, just with the modernization in here. These are all items that we have identified for surplus. I would note on there, one idea that's been floated by some of the fire crews is trying to get in contact with the schools to see if there's any students at home that need desks right now with being remote learning. So that would be one of our recommendations, that if this gets approved, that we contact the school district to see if we can't get these desks to students who might need them.
Do I have a motion to approve the disposal of the surplus equipment along with the chief request to look at possibly giving it to schools? Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make the motion to approve the surplus of the stated equipment.
And
Do I
I'll
have a
second
second?
the motion.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane,
Yes,
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmey,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes.
President Burke,
Yes.
passes 5-0 by roll call.
Moving on to Directors and Chief report. There's no Finance Committee meeting, but in our packet and available to the public is the spreadsheet of our expenses and revenue for the first 3 months of the year. You'll notice a couple of things I just called your attention, that our reserve funds that are in LAIF have been redistributed to new locations. There's also no CAL FIRE cost included in the expenses so far this year. But the reserves are in total 2 million within San Mateo County for operational reserves and over 10 million in LAIF. I'd note that we have spent $210,000 on Station 41 so far this year, and I hope we're all done with that. The other interesting point is, and maybe the chief might speak more to this in his report, that we received, and a notice was sent out that we received an additional $146,000 in ERAF payments that was part of a settlement between the counties and the state as to who gets the ERAF monies. That's the extent of my Finance Committee report. Ginny, did you have anything?
no,
Any questions? Moving on, volunteer report. Director Cockrell.
Seem to have misplaced my notes. I went there. It was a meeting, the conditions, and I apologize to the group for looking for my notes. I couldn't find them, so I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
I make a motion that that's always your report.
Okay, moving on. Land and Structures Committee report. Director Cockrell, Director Stockman.
I think the whole board has been dealing with land and structures for quite.
Yeah. Well, and we're probably going to hear a little bit about the visual grand opening in a moment. We move on to that too. Anything more on vegetation management, Director McShane?
no.
Okay, moving on.
There is one thing, sir.
Yes.
I talked with Chief Sampson today, and he tonight is speaking at the Mid-Coast Community Council meeting. And he said that he could be free to come to our meeting, our next board meeting, and to give a little speech about vegetation management. He's
Chief
got
Cox,
a
would you?
tremendous amount of information.
Chief Cox, would you look into that, see if we could make that happen, please?
Yep, no problem.
Very
So
good.
before you move on, Gary.
Yeah.
So I revisited the station again today, just kind of dropped by to see what they were doing, what's going on. So I think that Tim Pond lit a fire under David because there was more professional painters there today and they were caulking the heck out of everything. So that was better. And also Tim called me about the hood in the kitchen. So they had it replaced, or they had it down. They're going to replace it. They said it's too tight to get it in there. So he wants to have like gaps and have like a trim piece, metal trim piece. I said, as long as it looks good and fits, we'll be okay with it. So we will see what they come up with. And the
Great.
famous hose bib.
Hey,
So-
Bruce, this is Ian. Have
Hey, Ian.
they thought about a stackable shield over that versus one that is custom fit so that it has just a seam in it where it's stackable?
The sheet metal guy that was there, he was gonna have a trim piece, bottom and top to make it, just,
Okay.
stainless steel trim piece. And like I told Tim, as long as it looks good and fits and functions, we'll be okay.
Got it. Okay.
Right on.
Since we're getting close to the transfer over to our new station, maybe some more discussion about the station would be in order here. I've seen some of the work I've seen, and I actually had one of our citizens ask me about it, and it's something that's been bothering me, and I think I mentioned to you, Bruce, is the trim over those windows of Bispo, and I saw that they're all properly trimmed now, so that was very nice.
They're working on it.
Uh,
It looks different when you get closer, let me tell you.
Yeah, secondly, when I walked through it, it had a very small sink in the kitchen to deal with a bunch of fire crews.
Yeah,
I've seen,
I was not impressed with that sink either.
is that going to stay there, or are they going to get a bigger sink?
Nope, that's it. Unless we want to change it in the future.
I've seen bathroom sinks bigger than that. Okay, all right. That takes care of my question.
Hey, Bruce,
Yes, sir.
I have a question for Bruce.
go ahead.
I want to thank Bruce, first of all, because I know he has professional eyes on this project. Bruce, how many items are on the punch list?
Jonathan?
Yeah, we're well under, I want to say we're under 60 right now, Director McShane.
Progress.
Okay, because you see, I'm very stiff on something like that because I wouldn't want to move into a building unless that punch list was taken care of. I certainly wouldn't write my last check for that building.
Well,
That makes
okay.
sense.
We also remind you that we did hire an attorney
Yes,
to
I
look
remember
after our
that.
interests and
That
so forth.
means
So I think
on
that
hold.
we'll take care of that.
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
ALS JPA, Director McKinney.
No meeting, no report.
Hey, before I go on, I just want to echo Ginny's comment, Bruce. Thank you very much for your diligent work in taking a look at the station, following up on it. Thank you.
It's my
Emergency
pleasure.
preparedness, Director Stockman.
Yes, one point before I give my report on that, I know we're running a little longer than normal tonight, so
No
I'll try
problem.
to condense my notes to a few minutes, but I'd like you to consider for the agenda for next month is to take a look, the board in its totality, looking at our committees and seeing if maybe there's a better way that we can, just take a revisit of them. And if it's the best place where we're putting our energy, and with Chief Cox's input, rather there's committees. I think just your presentation tonight just shows how educating the entire board and the community on individual issues are really beneficial, not just for today's world, but for what the future is going to provide for the district. And I wonder if we might not be better served. And I'll use Bruce's following as an example of like with the joint powers and ALS, there's hardly ever meetings of that group. And I think maybe we could handle something like that to maybe more of an annual report where there's just a review of any past minutes or talk about what's happening in the year and how it might affect. But, we could just take stuff like that off the list. And I'm open to any ideas. I think there's categories, and it might even be with President Burke's. Maybe PERS needs to be looked at more than annual. Maybe there's some way that somebody can gather that information and just kind of update it each monthly meeting. I think again, it goes to that responsibility of educating the public and keeping all of us as board members on like what's changing. That might be an example of overkill, but
We'll take a look. We'll take a look at the committees, Bruce.
Yeah.
It's probably overdue.
Yeah. So with that, I have some ideas, but we'll share that in an open discussion of that topic. So back to emergency management. I did attend the KEEP meeting on October 2nd. And I want to talk about a few groups, and initially they're community groups, and they're groups that serve the Latino population and the underserved population. I think it's important to talk a little bit about those groups. They're not always directly linked to emergency preparedness, but they are in that they're our lifeline to the underserved in the entire fire district, as well as South County, where the CAL FIRE also represents. The first group being a loss. And it's a group that its definition in English is helping Latinos to dream. And it really started in 2011 and was a group that was really built more on respecting culture and educating culture within the community. But with the COVID response, they've taken a much larger role. So that kind of is where the link is to the district and really to preparedness. Some of the things they do is they visit some of the farms each week. They provide meals. They do case management, mental health, supply support. But with that, it's increased their presence and relationship with other local government. They do have a local office that's in the what's the building called where Moonside Bakery is? Anyway, they have an office in that building. So they do have local presence. Then I want to go to OES, and I don't know if we discussed it. I'm going to the reports from the groups that attended, which was about 25 people on the Zoom call. OES, and I think we maybe talked about it last meeting, where it switched from the sheriff's office to the county manager's office. That was a big change. And maybe Chief Cox in his presentation could just briefly speak to that. Corey Stoker, the city of Half Moon Bay, they've been doing more testing. They've started testing on Monday nights for COVID testing. You see that, it's over by the Ted Adcock Center. And they stated that they're working on their emergency ops plan. Julie Barr from the MRC, the Medical Reserve Corps, that continues to grow. They do have a new trailer, or the trailer they have has been mechanically updated. That was done by OES. So the thing's all ready to go. It's fully stocked now, tents, shelters, cots, generators, and they're continuing to work for grant money to keep that trailer updated and ready to respond. The HAM group continues to have certain HAM exercises together. So they're strengthening that relationship between CERT and the ability to communicate across the Coastside. They've updated communications at Station 40 from what I understand from that. Maybe Chief Cox can speak to that. Puente is that second group that represents our underserved, have a stronger presence in Pescadero, but it is a group that crosses over into the border of the fire district and what they do for our community. Red Cross, Jim Hawley gave an update. They talked a little bit about opening the process we used during the fires and opening the shelters, feeding. Again, there's more fires burning in North Bay. The time last month, they had 160 people in the Northern County fires. Almost done. To CERT, the update from Cynthia Sherrill was they're working on a hybrid CERT to where now they can, the CERT communities, Dave's been able to move classes through faster because they're doing it in two parts. They're letting the students do stuff online and take the test before, and then just have a one-day all hands-on final part of CERT. That's making our numbers increase. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Attorney's report.
Yes, good evening. We sent out a memo to all of you today, which shows that the county has moved from the red to the orange tier under the state regulations. And that's prompted questions from a number of our clients about whether or not these sort of meetings can now go live again. So we're doing some research into that. Our initial reach out to the other attorneys in the county demonstrate that no one seems to be moving in that direction, but we'll be sending you a memo with some additional info on that in the next several days. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Fire Chief's report.
All right, thank you. Just firstly, in your board pack, you'll see the flyer for the virtual grand opening of Fire Station 41. I think everyone got the email regarding this. There'll be a couple people in attendance beyond the board and the firefighters themselves. That includes Supervisor Horsley, who's confirmed that he will be there and able to speak, as well as a representative from MCC to be able to celebrate that day. The plan is to virtually stream the presentations and the actual ribbon cutting so people can be there live online. And then our county PIO will do a video walkthrough of the entire facility, talk to some firefighters and board members so that we can put a presentation out to the community to see what their new fire station actually is in these COVID restricted times. That is all contingent upon all of the hard work that's going on right now to try to get this in move-in ready shape by the 16th. I will say Director McKimmey has been an outstanding advocate for the board on a weekly basis there to ensure that the details are followed up with and that we get to that target of operationalizing the facility on November 16th. Just a few things on my notes. COVID-19, obviously.
Chief, can I interrupt just a moment? As far as inviting people, would you please make sure that former retired Chief Cole is invited?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
And Chief Cox, on that subject, is there a plan to advertise that virtual meeting so people can watch it? Will that be part of our local media or social media? How will you do that?
Yeah, so our PIO will put out a news release probably 7 to 10 days ahead of time so that it gets publicized in the community through the normal channels. And then she will probably invite a couple key media organizations like the Review or the Almanac to be there as well.
Thank you.
Great.
I didn't see my name on the speakers list. What's up with that?
I requested no.
Anyway, now Steve had some pretty good ideas for a grand opening, and maybe if we ever get a handle on this COVID-19 stuff, which seems to be in doubt, but if we do, one of Steve's thoughts was, and the more I thought about it, the better I liked it, inviting the high school band.
Yeah.
That was actually Chief Cox's idea, I think.
Well, anyhow, that not only gets the band, but then they tell everyone that they're going to be performing there, and so that gets a lot of other people.
Yeah, I think in the future for our annual open houses that we can definitely incorporate some of these post-COVID.
Thank you.
Please go on, Chief.
Just to get back to COVID-19, crews continue to be healthy at the moment. No major outbreaks within the district. And we continue to take our precautions at the fire station and on incidents. We are starting to see that PPE arrive that is a part of that county-wide FEMA grant that we got for about $43,000 worth of PPE for the district, for the firefighters, gowns, masks, respirators, etc. As far as administration is concerned, the office is here. You'll notice that the mailroom is now almost complete. For you specifically, all of the directors' boxes have moved out of the break room into the mail room. So when you're here next, you'll find your materials in a new spot. We're working on the finalization of just cleaning up the conference room now that that's no longer a storage room as well. You should see that become a much more professional room here in the near future. You will be able to take documents that you need to sign and whatnot into that room and use it as need be.
Yeah.
With that, I met with the president of KEEP yesterday and just had a great conversation about the fire district's involvement in emergency response and emergency management and collaborating and working together and really, very, very fortunate to have such a strong organization and leadership and number of groups that come together. And something that I personally am very supportive of is just the volunteer organizations that really want to do good and how can we foster that moving forward. Also gave a presentation to the City of Half Moon Bay Board, the City Council along with Corey regarding the CZU fires and the lessons learned. And we'll be presenting to MCC next month about zone haven evacuation planning in the district and what we're looking at along the coast should there be a disaster. We did submit the application for the District of Distinction, so we should be hearing about that in the near future as to its status.
Terrific.
Director Burke did mention the ERAF, that one-time funding. There's still a lot of unanswered questions regarding the long-term funding sustainability based on what the issues that came out last year, basically the state having a different take on how the funding formula works versus the county. We have not heard anything further about that since we wrote that letter. The OES, Office of Emergency Services, that was underneath the Sheriff's Department is now under the County Manager's Office. Dan Belleville is directing that department. He's the director of that. Dan and I have a very strong relationship, a very good working relationship that I think will benefit everybody. I'm very excited that he's in that role, and I think I look forward to working with him in that capacity. Director Stockman did mention about the radio. We did have a radio installed in the DOC that is now hooked to the main radio system here, which, if you remember, on our 7-year plan is identified as one area that we're going to focus on improvement in the next couple of years. Is how do we make that more robust for disasters? So slow steps there, but we do have a radio in there now. As far as personnel go, we have reflown the SSA, the Staff Service Analyst position. In the meantime, we are benefiting from a retired SSA, Jan, who lives out here on the coast. She works part-time for us on the county fire side and is also spending some time here on the coast. So she's a great benefit and asset and helping us out until we can find a permanent replacement.
That's not Jan Cochran, is it?
That is Jan Cochran, yeah.
Because she burned the crap out of us, to put it mildly.
The division chief's position is, we made offers on that position. We had 2 candidates decline the offers, and I would not because they didn't want to do the job. I think it was for other reasons. So we are reposting that position. Hope to have a word on it in the future. If that doesn't work, then we'll have to evaluate some other options as far as the administrative function versus the ops function. But that has been reposted, and we'll see the candidates that we get this time. As far as operations
timeline for that, Chief? Is that a projected timeline?
Yeah, so posting, it all goes to region, then to the state. So it usually posts in about 2 weeks. Then it's got a 2-week filing period. Then it takes about 2 weeks for them to get all the applications compiled and pulled back to us. So that we're looking at probably 6 weeks for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
The operations wise, nothing out of the ordinary apart from that one fire yesterday out towards Mavericks below the radar station. Burned about less than an acre, luckily not in a very dangerous location, but did appear to be an intentional fire. As far as training is concerned, we have a low angle rope rescue class going on this week here at Station 40. We do have an upcoming truck academy early in November, and we are starting the planning process for a volunteer fire academy in the spring, most likely sometime in March. As far as prevention is concerned, they still are making big strides doing their mandatory inspections. One change for this year is because of COVID-19, we are exploring a self-certification letter for businesses instead of an in-person inspection. And that's really because most of the year has been closed for businesses. And for us to do 800 inspections in 2 months is unrealistic. So we're exploring a self-certification postcard being sent to them with the requirements for them to send back as a one-time COVID solution. Chief Cosgrave continues to work hard with CERT. The new fence at Fire Station 44 is complete. If you drive by 44, the tree work has been complete on the rear of the property, and that new fence is in place. And I spoke with our retained appraisal services, and they will be starting the work on the 3 locations that we've identified for appraisals. But as they said, they're extremely busy right now, so I don't anticipate that'll be any time before the end of the year. Finally, for apparatus, we're still working on the specifications for the new engine to be ordered. as well as the installation of our AVL system, the new county dispatch system. We're almost completely there. We just have a few more vehicles to get up to speed. Apart from that, the last piece of news is just we were recipients of a California Fire Foundation grant, and that was fully funded grant for 3 new mobile radios. They're about $5,000 a piece for our frontline fire engines, 40, 41, and 44. That'll take us from radios that have a couple hundred channels to a couple thousand channels that are statewide radio loads. So nice work to Battalion Chief Ken Lord for staying on top of that one, and look forward to getting those radios in and hopefully the next few months. That's the end of my report.
Chief, so the Coast Guard right now with the COVID is doing virtual boat inspections.
Yeah.
We did one yesterday. I don't know if that's viable for our building or our commercial building inspections, or.
Yeah, that is a potential. So as far as our mandatories are concerned, our mandatory inspections, we will be doing face-to-face. We're going to go in and actually look at those. The only one that I'm reluctant to actually do, or I'm not reluctant, I'd like some mitigation measures to be in place, is to at Seton Coastside.
Yeah.
And that is something that our fire marshal's office is exploring as far as what additional measures they need to take. But as far as our non-mandatories, our business inspections that look at, you know, electrical strips, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, we think the most effective way to do that is going to be self-certify this year.
Okay.
Chief, 2 questions. One is we have a report to the grand jury pending. That's still pending, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'll work with legal on that.
And the second is that we've historically not had a November meeting and a combined meeting in December. And I don't know whether the workload or whatever needs to be done would lend itself to, again, just having one meeting for those 2 months. What does the board think? Does the board have any comments or?
I support that.
Sure. Me too.
Chief, I'd ask if you take a look at what's on the agenda and all that type of thing, and if it looks like it would work, I would just quickly looking at the calendar, and that to have it in a meeting in November on our normal time is a day before Thanksgiving, which would not work. And I was just looking at to see whether December 16th would work for everybody. And probably people are gonna, if you would send out, if you wish to do that, if we wish to do that, send out a note and just see who's available, what the possibilities are, or if there's another date that's more workable.
Through the chair, this is Jean Headley. Hello?
Yeah.
The third Wednesday of every month is my North Coast County Water District Board meeting, so I could not do the 16th. I could do the 5th or the 9th, any other day, but not the 16th.
Well, we'll start with you, Chief, and you to pick a date and look what it is and send it out and see what we can do. All right. Assuming again that you wish to do it, it would be a special meeting.
Yep, that sounds great. So cancel the November meeting and December meeting and call for a special meeting in December.
Correct.
Yep, happy to.
I hear no objection, so I assume everybody's comfortable with that. Okay. Anything else?
Either way.
Without objections, we adjourn. Thank you.
Thank
Night,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanksgiving.
Good night.
Gobble, gobble.